Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is July 6th here in beautiful New Jersey, the home of all the action of crypto. Perhaps not. Happy to see you all. It's been a nice holiday, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Josh Shigala from Volturo. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Good. As every week, I try to be as good as possible.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm coming to San Francisco for. I'm leaving tomorrow morning at 7 in the morning. The plane flight, so that's very unexciting. But the destination is exciting, and I'll be at going to a conference, the blockchain event, the blockchain conference, Freedom Fest in Vegas, and also what our guest is here to talk about, D10E. So it's very exciting. A lot of blockchain stuff, a lot of Bitcoin stuff, a lot of decentralization, a lot of poking the power structures in the ribs.
So I'm excited because we actually get to hang out in person. That'll be fun. I'll be speaking at the blockchain event. I'm actually speaking at Freedom Fest. I might actually be singing there. I'm hoping so. And if not, Bob Murphy and Avins are having a karaoke night on Friday night. Are you going to sing a karaoke song, or are you just going to watch and admire all the talent?
Oh, I'm going to be singing.
Oh, really? What's your karaoke go-to song?
I don't know, but I remember one time I chose Michael Jackson. That was just a wrong bet. That was just terrible. You don't realize how high he sings.
Well, you need to practice in advance because you don't want to make a fool out of yourself. This is a very serious competition. I don't know if you've ever partied with Bob Murphy, but he is not messing around when it comes to the karaoke.
Right.
Well, I was going to say after the karaoke extravaganza, Freedom Fest, then there's going to be the blockchain event, and then I'm flying quickly, all the way to San Francisco to make it for the full day of D10E, which, of course, Matt McKibbin is going to tell us more about, and we're really excited. I guess maybe let's bring Matt on and we'll get started. Matt, thank you very much for joining the show. Everybody, Matt McKibbin. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Can you see me? Am I on?
Yes, we can see you, and you're on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on, and it's a real pleasure. I can't wait for D10E. It's going to be a pretty epic conference, 1.5 day conference kind of thing, and you'll be there, and there'll be a lot of Liberty people and decentralization people, and just kind of merging those two groups, the techno-libertarians with the old school kind of libertarians, and it's very interesting. So I guess we'll start with the event. It was founded before we had Coin Congress, and that kind of dissolved away, and we decided to reform and reorganize the organization and call it D10E, which is the numeronym for decentralized. So numeronym is kind of shorthand. So if you were going to say internationalization, it would be I-18N. It would be the number of letters in between. So D10E is decentralize the numeronym. So we thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, I see. Does that come from the old the typewriters or the shorthand typewriters that they have?
I don't know where this originated. I know they use it a lot in different types of international organizations, I guess, as shorthand. It's not very common anymore, but it worked really well for decentralized.
What's the other podcast? A16Z, or was that what is that?
There is a podcast that does something similar. I don't know if that's the same.
Yeah, I always wondered where that. Maybe that's similar. Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, and I think you're right. Like the old school libertarians and the decentralization movement really have a common ground in the fact that they don't like centralized power structures, right? They don't like having these power structures that can then dictate down, but rather having a grassroots movement of a horizontal, of moving across and expanding that way to allow people to communicate directly, or having smart contracts and all these sort of things. So it's a very exciting time, and I think especially in the States, there's this history of libertarianism, and it's been dormant for so long, funnily enough, because it's the home of these concepts. But now I've really noticed a resurgence since the invention of Bitcoin of people starting to have these aha moments in economic theory of why libertarianism or even anarcho-capitalism or these concepts, these different philosophies actually make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think of Bitcoin as the decentralization money, or the separation of money and state, right? So we've, for a very, very long period of time, we've had the state as the provider of money, whether that's, you know, by force, by fiat, right, or
Yeah.
not. We now have a technology similar to the printing press, that kind of democratized information, or the internet democratized information that everyone can go see. This democratizes commerce in that you can build your own economy on top of blockchains. You can write your own rules, and the best rules for everyone will be the ones that people use. So not only are we separating, you know, the first application of Bitcoin was a currency, a unit of account that we get to trade on a public ledger, but now we're starting to see other applications where we get to disintermediate central third parties. And what's the biggest central third party in the world? It's the government. So the more that we can disintermediate central parties through different types of voluntary technologies that we all agree and want to use, you know, I think the better off that we'll be. And that's what this conference is about. Four main pillars, I guess, just go into a little bit. One is blockchain fintech. The second one is the sharing economy. So we really felt no one was making them feel special at all, but the sharing and utilization of resources from on a peer-to-peer is very important. The future of work. So how do teal organizations, holacratic organizations, self-managing organizations work, and is that the future of how we organize? Instead of a top-down hierarchical structure, we can do more of a flat structure. And the final one is more of a catch-all, in my opinion, but disruptive tech and culture. So we have anything from drones and 3D printing, which is decentralizing manufacturing, to we actually have Dr. Wolfson from maps.org speaking, and he's the director of research on MDMA psychotherapy research and curing PTSD, and how they're disrupting psychiatry and mental health practices. So he's going to be giving a talk, about a 40-minute probably fireside chat with someone, which is very disruptive to culture. So that's I like to stick that in there at the end.
How many tracks do you have going on? Like, what's the actual layout of the conference? Is it 2 or 3, or how are you guys approaching it? And how long
Yes.
are you doing a lot of panels? Are you doing a lot of, tell me a little bit more about the program.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first evening will be a networking event. And this is where all the speakers, all the sponsors get together, have some drinks. You know, it's much easier to go talk about serious, disruptive, decentralizing things after you've taken some shots with the speakers, right? So go, get to know each other a little bit and have that the night before. And then during the day, we'll start out with individual presentations. It's probably one track for like most of the morning. We might split off into 2 as we have a lot of sponsors that would like to get individual presentations in. And then in the afternoon, we split off into 2 tracks. One is blockchain disruptive tech and culture, and the other is the sharing economy and the future of work. And then we'll all come back together at the end for a keynote by Andreas Antonopoulos on decentralization. So.
I'm glad you guys are able to have Andreas speak. He's one of my favorite speakers. I believe Pam Morgan is also giving a D10E, a C4 kind of talk, right?
She's going to be on the panel on decentralized governance for a distributed world. So it's going to talk a lot about DAOs and her, I think her program called DAM, which is a mediation network for decentralized organizations. So.
I'm a big fan of Pamela, of course, and I'm curious to see. They had originally been planning on submitting that to the DAO. I wonder what will happen now, and I hope that doesn't fall by the wayside because it was a really good idea. Should be interesting.
Yeah, I think that they will get funding. There will be DAOs too, but they will be have a little more human element to them. And I know that there's a lot of different methods I think that they want to try, maybe not by raising hundreds of millions of dollars, but if you can cap different types of fundraising, and that way there's only a couple million dollars to steal if something bad were to happen. But they won't be all autonomous, that's for sure.
Do you guys know what you're doing for the after party yet?
We don't. We are, well, we are going to have you play, of course.
Hope so. Well, you got to have the right environment for it. But yeah, I think that sounds great.
We're finishing up trying to getting the different venues. We've got some connections in San Francisco, but we have to finalize all of those things, and it's getting to crunch time. We're 2 weeks away, so.
Well, it's going to be really fun. I normally start out the interviews by talking about how I met certain guests, because we didn't all come here from a technical background or something. I mean, there's such a variety of different people involved in cryptocurrency. You actually remembered when we met. I sort of did, but maybe you could tell the story, because we met a long time ago in 2012.
Yeah. Well, I had just moved to DC. I was had just moved in, and I was super pumped about being able to be involved in different political or anti-political events, if you will, Ron Paul events. I was getting into the philosophy and everything, and Adam Kokesh held the Veterans for Ron Paul March on the White House, and did the moment of silence for all of the people that have died in all of the wars. And then afterwards they had an event, I guess, at the Rock and Roll Hotel, and I got to meet you. I got to see you perform, and got to see Adam, and I think there were a couple other really awesome performers there from the Liberty movement that I got to meet, and it was just, I don't know, it was a rush. It was one of my first times like actually getting to meet people in the movement versus watching YouTube videos, right?
Yeah, well, I remember that, and I always call that the best day ever, because I got to meet with Amy Allen, who was such an inspiration. Jordan and I got to sing. They invited me on the stage with Golden State, and it was really magical to sing in front of everybody, because at that, it was freezing, icy cold out, and there's over 1,000 people in front of the Washington Square Monument. And this was the first time that I had really engaged with, this was the first time I'd performed for the libertarian audience at all. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of people. And I went up to the stage, I don't know if you remember, but the microphone wouldn't work and the guitar wouldn't work. It was so awkward. But years of playing in crappy bars in New York prepared me for these kinds of emergency situations. And I stepped up to the front of the stage to sing a cappella, and everybody moved a little bit closer, and I felt like that was this weird defining moment of that day where we were all kind of brought closer. And granted, the political thing hasn't really panned out. I mean, I was a lot more faithful in the 2012 elections than in the 2016. But I think that those ideas really unified people, and I love to see that evolution into the Bitcoin space. How did you end up doing Bitcoin stuff when you started out with Liberty? And maybe give a little bit more of your involvement in your activism and stuff.
Yeah. I started doing the activism as soon as I came to DC. I wanted to do a podcast and radio show, much like this, and I ended up doing Liberty Panacea radio with my brother, and we covered. It was a live show, and we had I think by the end of it we had 70,000 views on. We didn't even have a website. I don't even know how to build a website at that point in time. But Blog Talk Radio would do all of that. So I got to interview some cool people and go over that. And I really liked monetary policy, or liked studying and understanding monetary policy. And once I discovered Bitcoin, all of those worlds kind of came together. And you can, you understand how central banks were kind of, inflating the money supply. You understand that decentralizing central banks was a good idea, and that we actually have a solution where it doesn't matter how many guns the government points at a math problem, it doesn't change. So, you can decentralize. And I went to the Future of Money conference and just started talking about this on the radio show constantly. I'm not really much of a coder, like a developer, so I was trying to figure out where my space is in this new technology, and more of an evangelist, and I found out that I really like doing business development for startups. So that's where I got involved, and just got involved with whatever projects I could possibly be within the blockchain anarchist people after the Ron Paul campaign kind of fizzled out. What's the next thing, and how are we going to continue to do this? And
Yeah, you've worked with BitPay and with Factum and all sorts of great projects in this
yeah.
space.
I'm the DC. Once I found out about Bitcoin, I just started going to the meetup constantly, and so every meetup I would be there and be engaged. And then I had my network, and a lot of them weren't libertarians necessarily. So I had the libertarian network who I was like, "Yo, look, it's free market money, right?" And they did that. I went to the Future of Money conference in Atlanta with got to meet like Jeffrey Tucker, and
That was a great conference. That's how
Yeah.
I got into it because of Jeffrey Tucker. I give him credit. I mean,
Absolutely.
Tony sold me my first coins. The BitPay guys did, so I have love in my heart. But Tucker made it exciting and fun, and that was a really good conference.
Yeah, and so that's where it evolved, and so it's just kind of thinking about it's being in that mindset of how do you disintermediate central parties, and how do you use this technology to do so, and the more people that can do that, the freer and the better off we're going to be. So that's my goal.
So why do you think that there's resistance in the liberty movement to Bitcoin? Is it because it's traceable? Okay, not to sound conspiratorial, but when you hear people saying that Bitcoin could be this one world currency that eliminates cash and that maybe isn't such a good thing, do you ever think about that? Because I feel like that's sometimes the counter of a little bit more alarmist libertarians, but I think that there's actually something to be considered with that. Sometimes I'm wondering if I'm shilling for the wrong team, but I hope not.
So there's a difference between having a centralized one world currency on a public ledger that can be turned off and is not permissionless. And I think that as central banks play with blockchain technologies, which they're doing all over the place, they may be able to do that. But as long as you have a decentralized system and you're not doing permissionless innovation on top of it, you're going to it increases freedom way more than it creates tyranny, in my opinion. It doesn't mean that they can't come after you, but in my opinion, as long as it's decentralized, then anyone can play on it and do it, just like the internet. Well, now they can see everything you're doing. Well, everyone wants to share as much true information as possible on the internet, and the centralized TV studios, as we were talking about before, they're dying. So.
I would like to add to that as well that it's a voluntary thing, and there's nothing to stop me going out with I don't know, some beautiful pebbles that I've painted and start trading them with someone that wants to accept them, or a community that wants to accept them. The thing with Bitcoin is because it's not forced onto anybody, it's a voluntary on-ramp. So if you feel that it's heading in the wrong direction, if you feel that it's starting to become the beast that traces and tracks and can do whatever, then you'll jump onto another blockchain. And the whole point is to compete with fiat currencies, to compete with centralized banks. So if it does become this world thing where only it exists, then you just, it wouldn't only exist. There would be hundreds of different blockchains, hundreds of different local currencies. Even, I just came back from London. Brixton has got the Brixton pound. These little community currencies are still happening, So
wait, is that a cryptocurrency or what is that?
no,
Or is it just like a regular because in America we have Ithaca hours and they tried this in Breckenridge in Colorado where you would have a local currency that was circulated and people just agreed to use it and that was their new local currency. Is it sort of like that or what is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. It's pegged to the pound, but you can only use it in Brixton. So you take your pound somewhere and they swap it over to the Brixton pound, and then you can spend that in your local community. And what that does is circulate that money in that community. And you see this sort of thing happening all over the world. Like for instance, in the Jewish community, they used food and said everything has to be kosher. It's the same sort of thing. It circulates the currency in this thing in food, which is a very, very, a lot of money within a community tends to go towards food because we all need to eat 3 times a day, and that keeps that currency in the community. And so the Brixton pound is similar, where you're keeping it in the community, but the end of the day, you have to trust that whoever's issuing these Brixton pounds isn't issuing you one and myself, isn't issuing himself or herself more Brixton pounds than actually are backed by pounds.
Right. So how do they do it on a blockchain to remove the central issuer? Or?
No, it's been around a lot longer than Satoshi's white paper, but it's just an old school thing. You go and you get this bit of paper that But what I'm saying with that is that there's a lot of competing currencies out there now, and what Bitcoin allows is the explosion of competing currencies, the absolute explosion of these things. So you really, if you feel that one is being corrupted, if you feel that one is being too controlled somehow or badly managed, you can exit.
Matt, this isn't your only Bitcoin project that you're working on. Seems like a good time to segue. You're also working with Ubiquity, which is dealing with blockchain and real estate, but that's sort of broad. So maybe you can explain it in a easy to understand way. Not all the listeners are super Bitcoined out. I mean, actually, they probably all are, but I try and keep it, for the average person so they can understand too.
Absolutely, yeah. No, the layman's terms is very important. So, as I said before, Bitcoin in general, the first application of the Bitcoin protocol, or the value transfer, the Internet of Money, if you will, was a currency. We could trade units of account on a worldwide ledger, worldwide public ledger. I call it the worldwide ledger. I think it's a cool marketing term, but and so once we kind of started to look at other applications of, well, what else can we do with an immutable public ledger? Well, we could register a stock or a bond, or we could do voting on this and remove all of the vote counters, right? Like, why would we want to trust human beings to count pieces of paper to do votes? That's ridiculous. So what we're doing is we say, well, what else do we want to register on a universal public ledger that has information? Well, real estate, property. Something like, what, $7 trillion dollars worth of real estate that doesn't have a title to it around the world. Now, we're not focusing on the third world currently, but we're focusing on U.S. and North America. But we've created a system using the Bitcoin blockchain and colored coins, which is an application layer that allows you to denote a specific piece of Bitcoin and track its ownership. And you can denote it as whatever digital asset that you'd like. So you can make it a stock, you can make it a bond, you can make it the title of a property, or register it as a property and associate all of the legal documents that are considered ownership to that token. And you can, if you do a title search on something, you can make sure that this has a clean bill of title, put all of that information onto our decentralized distributed network, register the property on the Colored Coins blockchain, and then the more people that use this kind of parallel system to transact, or at least to record what has happened, the more power it has. So if you put all of this information when you bought a house and you registered it on the blockchain and it's there, and you transfer that ownership to someone else when you sell it, and then they transfer it over, and you're all signing with your keys. You can see what title companies, what mortgage people have signed on this specific property, what they have done. The more, kind of like a confirmation on the Bitcoin blockchain, the more power it has. So if I've transferred this property 5 times, that's 5 times people have looked at this and said, all right, there's no errors, right? We're all good. We're going to transfer this over, and you can have multi-sig. So we view this as a way to create a blockchain system for property ownership in parallel, and do real estate transactions on here. And that's basically the gist of it for now. We're a parallel recording system to the county recorders, and it's blockchain secured. So anything you put on there, any document you upload, it's immutable. It will be there forever. All the survey documents, everything. So if there's missing heirs, missing chains of custody, this will be there for the rest of time. It's not even dependent on us.
That's great.
I have a couple questions actually.
Yeah.
Number one, why did you do it on? Why did you use colored coins? And then the other question would be, why would you need to, like, if there's, how are people going to know to go to your registry of information versus other people's? Like, doesn't that require you to basically be the best and the only registry in order for it to be effective? Because let's say there's other companies that are trying to do what you're trying to do. Wouldn't that make it more difficult for you to really establish yourself? Because if there's, let's say, 5 different blockchains with all this different real estate stuff, is there a way for them to communicate and to create a global database that makes sense?
Yeah, very good questions. We started building the system. We started about 8-9 months ago. Started putting a team together, and at the time, I mean, Ethereum was still very, very nascent, and there's not really a lot of mature tools. And Bitcoin blockchain, I mean, is the most secure, the longest lasting blockchain out there. And they have these colored coins. Kalu is the Israeli company that builds a software development kit and an API that you can create digital asset tokens on. So it was the most mature tools out there to do what we were trying to do.
They just raised 6.9 million.
Yeah, they're doing.
No,
really
I think
well.
it was even more than that. They raised quite a bit of money. I worked with Amos on the creation of Tatiana Coin originally. He had like a crowdfunding site that we used.
Color coin.
Why not like Counterparty? And I'm not hawking for Counterparty, but I don't understand what is the advantage of colored coins versus like a Counterparty. Ethereum is still, like, I think pretty experimental. But why not? Because even for me, sometimes people ask me why I don't have colored coins. I'm like, I'm not really sure, but I had heard something that if you send a colored coin to the wrong address, it just disappears forever. So if that is interpreted correctly and I understood them correctly, wouldn't that be a problem for people sending them around, real estate information?
Right, and so we use colored coins because my CTO investigated the different things, and he said, I want to use these tools because they're awesome and they will do what I want them to do. And in terms of, I mean, the real estate information, I wish I had the link here, but you can see we actually registered the first real estate transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. We did all the closing documents and registered the property. There's a picture of it because you can have metadata underneath. So you can have a picture, you can have all the form fields you want of the year built and the county and links to the external information. So we're not opening this up to the public in any way. This is going to be a business-to-business solution. So title companies, insurers, probably mortgage financiers will put their information on there, and they'll always have an immutable record of what was done and who did it, because you can reveal the issuer or the person that put the information up. So
can I just say also, like, color coins has been around for as long as I can remember. I remember seeing the first altcoin was Litecoin and Namecoin back then. I think there was one before that. But at that time, reading the Bitcoin Talk forums, there was this concept of color coins all the way back then. So it's a very mature protocol, and I think I really like it. I think Colorcoin is a really nice protocol.
Yeah, and so that was where we're blockchain agnostic. So to answer the other question, we don't really care what blockchain we use. We care about which one we can use the best now, and if there's another one that we need to put on a stack or do smart contracts on, like Rootstock is doing smart contracts for the Bitcoin blockchain, and we're going to be on their test net. But I envision very, very much that these blockchains will all be interoperable. I can't imagine that they're not going to make them interoperable, because there's going to be so many of them, and if you can't trade or associate information with each other, it'll be kind of useless in my opinion.
Well, it affects all of
Outside.
them.
Yeah.
Like it forces all of them to either be the best or go home. And that, we're doing a music industry panel, I don't know, like some sort of how creatives can use the blockchain panel at D10E.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've chosen to approach things from the fans and funding kind of connection layer. And one of the reasons why I've shied away from taking an interest in the registration of work on the blockchain is because of that very problem, right? How does everybody know to look for my work on this blockchain? Why wouldn't they go to another one? And who's going to get everybody to kind of play along? But I guess there's an incentive for a third party to come in and provide that portal for all of these different things to kind of communicate with one another.
Yeah, so there's side chains and there's interoperable. I mean, in terms of, and a lot of this is still under development in many ways, but the technology is only what 6-7 years old, and it's so in 5. Put it to you this way: in 5 or 10 years, I absolutely imagine that will be how you register your song. If you look at Alexandria, the other people, Devin Reed, they're saying you only get a 100th of a cent when someone plays your song on YouTube, right? With their system, someone can pay you directly, and they can pay you 1 cent per play. You're still getting 100 times what you would if you put it on YouTube or iTunes. So that intermediation of those third parties is really important. But yeah, I very much imagine that in 5 or 10 years, everything that you want to track of value will be on this worldwide ledger. Because if it isn't, then how do you know what the history of it is? And this goes with real estate. I imagine in five years less, they'll pass some sort of law that says you must put all of your real estate transactions on the blockchain. Because otherwise we don't have a history of it, and we can have problems, missing errors, we can have fraud, and it's just a better system to track.
Yeah,
really
and even if they don't force you and say you have to, the market price might be less if it's not.
Right. Well, they'll always come back after the fact, after it's already working and great and people are doing it. We'll say, oh, you must do this now. So that's what I view, is that this technology, the government will always be behind in regulations, but this technology will be amazing for recording and transferring ownership of anything.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Matt, for joining us today. Where can people catch up with you? Obviously, on July 20th, we're all going to be in San Francisco, and that'll be at d10e.org. And then you've got Ubiquity, UBITQUITY.io. What about your social? How can people connect?
Yeah. Come get a ticket on d10e.org. We've got John McAfee as a speaker. We've got Andreas Antonopoulos as a speaker. We have Tatiana Monroe as a speaker. So my social is at Matt_McKibbin. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. And then Ubiquity, yeah, if you're in the real estate business, come check us out. You can get early access to the system. It's been a pleasure. I really, really loved coming on the show, and definitely want to do it again. And we can talk about pretty much anything. I'm here. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Looking forward to partying together in San Francisco. Everybody, hope we can see you there. Our next guest we're going to bring on in just a minute, but before we did, I wanted to see if there were any announcements. Okay, so Freedom Fest, right? Then we've got the blockchain event. Then we've got D10E. There's a Reitzig event here in New York City on July 26th, so I think that'll be really cool. And also, totally random self-promotion, but I just recorded a new song. So if anybody wants to hear this cool live version of me singing Trouble in Mind, we'll leave that in the show notes as well. So that was fun little random thing I did on the 4th of July, and I'm happy to share that stuff with everyone. But our next guest is actually a repeat guest. We don't have a lot of repeat guests here. There's so many interesting things happening in crypto. But I think that the work that Liz Reitzig is doing is really, really important. Liz is, of course, a very good friend of mine. I generally only invite very good friends of mine. But what's great about Liz is that she brings together some really important components. Now, the coding people and the tech people are just thinking about that stuff all day long. Liberty people are, thinking about fighting the power. But in order to have the fuel and the strength in order to do all these things, you need to have a lot of, wellness, right? And I don't know how else to describe what Liz does, but Liz, why don't you explain it? Because you kind of bring the farming stuff and healthy stuff all together in one.
Yeah. Hi, Tatiana. Thanks so much for having me on. I love being on your show.
Great. And we love having you.
I love what you cover. That whole discussion you just had with Matt was amazing. So how I describe myself is as a systems thinker, because I look at these different components and what doesn't work and what does work, and why do you need these other components? How does one system affect other systems? And my main focus is, as you mentioned, it's on food, nutrition, and gardening, farming, those aspects of it. How do those things in our lives that a lot of us don't think about or maybe take for granted, how do they affect all those other things in our lives? And how does that affect our societies, our cultures? How does it affect our healthcare industry? Or how does it actually affect our economic scene? And how do these things touch on each other? And what happens when one thing goes down? How does it affect the other things?
Right.
I call myself a food systems person because that's my main focus, but I look at it in the context of all these other systems.
I think it's really great. I think a lot of the Western world, especially, is very focused on getting on specializing, on extreme specialization, especially the medical industry. You go to the doctor and you say, yeah, I've got something a bit sore, and they're like, oh, you're going to have to see an ear doctor about that, or eyes, nose, and throat, ears, nose, and throat. So, whereas having this holistic view on a topic is very, very important, and I feel that we, as a society, have actually gone a bit too specialized and realized, you know what, if you if you keep doing something over here, it might affect something totally that doesn't seem that it's related. And so, yeah.
Josh, you make a really good point, and using the human body as an example is great because it's something that most everybody can relate to. So, right, if you're having a symptom of some sort, you have a cold, you have a runny nose, you go to the doctor, you say, this keeps happening, or maybe you get bronchitis from it. And maybe the doctor says, oh, well, here's this antibiotic, or go home and rest, you'll recover. But what you're experiencing is actually a symptom, and it's being caused by some sort of underlying condition. And what you need to do if you want to deal with that is you need to address the underlying condition, whether it's inflammation or allergies, combination of that. But in the same way, like, let's look at a bigger picture. Let's look at what's not working in the world and say, is this a symptom of something else that we need to address, or is this actually the root cause? And we're talking about blockchains and decentralized currencies, and I heard you talking about complementary currencies, which I love that topic, and I think that's one of the antidotes to some of what we're seeing. But when you look at that, like, our economic system is completely broken. So we can look and we can ask the question, well, is our economic system broken, or is our our ethics a little bit skewed, and which one is affecting which? And I don't think that's there's no easy answer there, right? Everybody's going to have a different perspective on that based on experiences, but that's the kind of thing that I like to look at, and especially in the context of our food systems. So how can our food systems tackle these bigger questions of our health and of our economics, in a community basis and in a much larger basis? How do they affect each other? How do they play into each other? What can we do within our food system? How can we change that one little component and have that change affect poverty in third world countries, for example?
Yeah, I really like your example of where something's a symptom. It's actually explaining. It's telling you that there's a greater problem, and right. A lot of people go, "Oh, I got to fix that symptom." For instance, bruising. You bruise a lot. It's not about trying to fix that bruise. It's about saying, you know what, my body is now telling me, "Hey, you've got a lack of zinc or a lack of vitamin K or something that's underlying." So this little bruise is nothing compared to what could be happening inside
Right.
that you don't see. So, hey, thanks for telling me, buddy, that I've got a lack of something through this bruise. I'm not just going to cover it up with some cream. I'm going to actually deal with the underlying issue, and that's really important.
Yes. And it's the same thing in the bigger world too, where we look at these systems, and we can look at how do we deal with this, looking and mimicking natural systems.
So what are your solutions? Do you have any tips and tricks?
Oh yeah, I've got all kinds of solutions. I really focus on the lowest common denominator, if you will, and that's the soil that we all walk on, and how changing that soil and changing our relationship to the soil and our relationship to the food we eat can transform our lives and our communities. I like to look at what can we implement in our daily lives for changing our food buying habits to source locally or producing some of our own, and always with a focus on what is that, how that food is produced, and how does it mimic natural patterns. Can we actually support most of our calorie needs from farms that are restoring nutrients to the soil and revitalizing the land that they're producing on?
But how do we know? I mean, that's not something that I feel that we have much control over, right? I mean, other than supporting them by buying their products, but how do we know about the soil, for example, and how their farming practices are? It's hard enough, I think, to know if something is organic and where it's from in the first place, but then to be worrying about the soil, it seems just like, what am I going to worry about that for? You know?
Blockchain.
Yeah, I get it.
No, I'm just joking.
Well, Tatiana, it's hard. I don't think there's an easy answer to that, and I think that's why a lot of people don't make the effort. But what I do know is that when you make the effort, it's always worth it.
Is there a way to make it like less requiring people to change their habits, though? I mean, are there simple ways that people can do this without, having to go all super research and doing a lot of work surrounding it? I don't know how realistic that is for the average person, and I think that trying to change people's behaviors is a little bit harder.
What I'd love
coming up with solutions that provide that in an easier way where people can participate. Like people all know to go to their farmer's market, right?
Right.
So that's something that they can easily do.
Yeah, I'd love to see. Sorry, Liz.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just while Tatiana was talking, I thought that's to give farmers a token, like a colored coin, by like a third-party auditor that comes and audits their farm and says, okay, you're not using sprays and you're not using this and that. So here's these color coins you can sign a key on, and you can print that signature onto labels that you're using that authenticates on the blockchain that you've been audited for the good practices that you've taken, and because usually a lot of these good practices also have economic consequences for the farmers. It's usually a lot more or a bit more expensive, or at least takes a lot of education to figure out how to do something not mainstream, or to fight big pharma, especially if they're trying to go after you because some seed blew onto your land.
Right.
But it might be a nice way to cope with what you were saying, Tatiana. In how can you be sure? It's hard enough to know if something's organic.
Well, Liz, you've actually experimented with farming and cryptocurrencies. What has been your experience with that, and like how did you try and solve some problems? Because I know that there's also the issues that the government kind of cracks down on all these farms, and there's a lot of problems involved in the food industry. So how have you taken approaches using cryptocurrency in order to fix that up?
Oh, we might have lost Liz.
We might have lost Liz. I'm not sure. Well, hopefully she'll come back in. Apparently, Liz has been working with this farm, and there's an issue with the milk, and it's reported that. Oh, Liz, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, now she's back. Yeah, I didn't want to tell the story because I'm not really very good with it.
Okay. Do you want me to answer that other question now?
You could do both. Take your time.
Okay. So basically, the big challenge with getting farmers involved in tech is that they want to farm. They don't want to spend all day at the computer. They don't want to learn this new technology. And it's really hard to bridge that gap for them to deal with that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of farmers are already going out and having to deal with a lot of new technology, drones and self-driving tractors and a lot of this stuff. So trying to get them onto this whole crypto space is going to be tricky, right?
Yes, it is super tricky. And I don't think that's an insurmountable challenge, but I think they need to see the clear benefits of it. But I also think that we need to meet them somewhere. We've got to look at what we're doing, and whether it's small incremental changes we're making or whether we want to start our own farm, we've got to meet them somewhere along those lines that we can say, you know, you're making effort. We want to make effort to support your way of farming so that you still have a farm to go home to, and you're not trying to maintain a farm while you're working 2 full-time jobs just to pay for all the necessities.
I actually see this in a whole lot of areas in life. For instance, cardiologists spend 7 years studying this one organ, this heart, and getting really good, and they're amazing at it. And all of a sudden, pacemakers are coming along, and pacemakers are whole new. Like, you have to be a total computer hacker genius guy or girl to actually learn this it's a whole new field, right? But they've just been slammed. Okay, now learn this. And so I think there's a lot of cases where there's traditional careers that have all of a sudden been technified, and if you're not technologically savvy or interested in learning new technologies, then you're going to have a really hard time, and it's kind of hard to convince these people.
It sure is. It really is. And yeah, I don't think there's an easy one-size-fits-all solution to that, because it does take effort. Just like we want people signing up to do something on the blockchain, whether it's exchanging money or exchanging titles, we want people to start using this technology. And in the same way, that takes effort. It takes effort to reevaluate how we're acquiring our food, and is this the best way that we can, and can we find a farmer that's operating a little bit more sustainably, or a farmer who's already using the blockchain technology for some aspect of their farm. Yeah, no doubt that farmers are required to use a lot more technology than many of them are comfortable with, and that is coming with the territory now, and we're seeing it more and more. But it takes effort on our part, too, to go ahead and have a deeper relationship with those who are producing our food, and understanding how that process occurs so that we can do a better job for ourselves and for them.
Yeah, well said.
So, Liz, what have you been working on locally that you've been kind of excited about?
Are you referring to a specific farm?
No, not necessarily. I'm just curious if anything has been going on in terms of, I mean, I was talking about that, the issue that one farm was having with their milk, and I thought that it was pretty interesting, the intervention on that. So maybe you could talk about that, because you've been pretty upset / excited about it.
Well, right. One of the things we see over and over for the farms that are producing sustainably or restoring nutrients to the soil, one of the things they deal with is extended government harassment. And so one of the farmers I work closely with produces raw milk, and they are getting mercilessly harassed by various government agencies. And this is the kind of farm that I think it's so important to support them, because of their farming practices and because of who they are within their community and within the larger community, and yet they're the ones getting attacked by these government agencies.
Yeah, someone needs to give these government agencies a fridge. You know, it's something that keeps food fresh. It's this thing. It's this box. You don't need to overheat things anymore. You can actually just get them and put them in the fridge. I just thought, you know.
Right. Because of the raw milk, so we can keep it cold.
Yeah, you know, traditionally we used to have a lot of stuff have to be cooked because we didn't have this thing called a fridge. Fridges are kind of new, really. I mean, it's only sort of 50s or 40s that we had fridges, right? So everything was cooked, and we've got this culture of cooking, and everything has to be heated, and you destroy any bacteria. That's fantastic, all great stuff. But fridges are this amazing technology. Actually, you know, we don't think about it because it's just this thing that's always on in the corner. But in actual fact, it's actually what we can do is stop heating a lot of this stuff and start getting the full benefits of a lot of foods by not destroying the nutrients through heat.
Well, Josh, it's interesting you talk about heating, because traditionally the way that people preserved food, well, one of the ways, for example, with milk, is they made cheeses. You know, you have your different cheese for different regions of the world, different towns in Italy, or everywhere really, but that's how people preserved that particular food. And you get cheeses that last 2 years. That's a great way to preserve it, and it didn't require any heating. So yeah, there's a lot of great ways to preserve that don't involve heating or destroying the beneficial bacteria or enzymes.
Yeah, or also fermenting foods is also another great way. And I think a lot of people are lacking in probiotic gut bacteria these days because you know, we're just not fermenting foods anymore. We're just it was a really good way of storing food, is grabbing a cabbage and chucking some salt in a jar and
definitely
in the dark place, and then 2 weeks later you got this nice fizzy probiotic that will just boom your immune system like crazy.
Absolutely, and it's got this incredible benefit for our own health. And looking at food rather than just as food. It's not just entertainment or just to get through the day. It's not just calories. And if we can look at food as a way to heal our bodies, and as a way to heal our soils, as a way to heal our communities, we've got a different relationship with it, and hence a different relationship with our farmers who are producing it, and then with the interconnected systems that support it.
Well, it sounds like we've got a lot of work ahead of us, guys.
Yeah.
So, how are you melting all this in with technology, or with Bitcoin, with blockchains, with these sort of things? Is there any way that's melting together in your world, or any way you see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of having there be a specific currency for farmers and having it tied to different verification of different practices, where you could have a GMO label, or you could have a grass-fed, organic, biodynamic, any of those. And then also how to use technology to leverage the decentralization of our food systems. That is happening in small pockets all over the world right now, where people are trying out different technologies, different apps or web-based systems, so that you can connect the producers to the people who want what's being produced. And a lot of those are working really well. I recommend finding some of those resources and finding a local producer, or start somehow getting your own hands dirty and producing some of your own food. Anything to get that connection back.
Yeah, I've seen a startup here in Berlin that actually is, this is the typical startup pitch, but the Uber for farming, and basically it sort of decentralizes pickup from local farmers in a region, and you can go shopping and get this stuff delivered. It's amazing, you know, and this is all the stuff that we're living in this day and age, where the sharing economy mixed with enlightenment of understanding, or going back to understanding food and nutrition, plus this amazing invention that Satoshi gave us, is all coming together in this beautiful melting pot, which is giving us so many opportunities to disrupt and to take back power.
Yep. And I think that touches on what Tatiana was asking at the beginning, which is, how do we make this a little bit easier for people? And I think technology can go a long way to doing that. Like you said, this app where it is the Uber of local foods and it brings them to people. I run something very similar in my area, which we call it a buying club, and that's essentially to organize local deliveries of fresh farm goodness.
Fantastic. Great stuff.
Excellent. So Liz, you're doing some writing, and hopefully I think you're going to be doing some more videos. We talked about that the last time, so like the idea. Liz has been giving me little tips and tricks over the years, which I've found really helpful, so hopefully you guys can check that out. Liz, where can people connect with you?
Well, I write at nourishingliberty.com, and that's either it looks like some of the personal writing I do, like I think you saw the story I wrote about the gardens, or I do political writing about the food regulations and what's happening, mostly U.S. and Canada, although I will be expanding to other parts of the world. But how are those regulations affecting the farmers that they're impacting, and how is that in turn affecting us and our access to clean, good food? I talk a lot about the GMO labeling issue and about GMOs in general, like what is a GMO, what's the problem with it? That's something that I think the Liberty community doesn't really pay enough attention to in general. And maybe there's just a lack of awareness there, I don't know, but it's something that I don't see how one can be a libertarian and be in favor of GMOs as they exist. That's a whole nother conversation, though. But yeah, Nourishing Liberty, that's where my writing is.
Excellent. So everybody, we have to do the magic word, which is a phrase that we do for our LTB audience. I don't know why there's an echo. If everybody else can mute themselves. Thanks. So anyway, the magic phrase I think we should do is clean, good food, because that's what we want. And thank you, Liz, very much for joining us. We're going to take the next few weeks off because Josh and I are traveling, but we'll be back on the show with a lot more guests. We'll probably be doing some shows through the summer and then getting going for the fall. Thank you once again, Matt, for joining us. Thank you very much, Liz, for joining us. Hope you guys can all connect online. As always, please support freeross.org. And I guess that's it. We'll see you all soon. Take care.